Hello, everyone, and many thanks for your attention for joining this stream. And of course, many thanks to all the members of our community who will join later on or will watch video of this stream in a recording. Today is 16th of July. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning, Moscow time. And as always, I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments that Russian media and public is paying attention to. And I hope you will find this episode uh, interesting and useful, better than yesterday's episode, because I guess yesterday's my update was not liked by nobody because project did not receive even a single donation or the tip. Hopefully I will do today a little better than that. So yes, as always, dear friends, first goes news segment, and after news segment we will have some short, like 15, 20, 30-minute community chat. Let's have exchange of opinions in real time. But first goes news update. And well, I will start with this report that last night Russian armed forces launched quite a large-scale long-range strikes on military and logistical infrastructure of the Kiev regime. Explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rog, Vinnytsia, Kharkov, Kramatorsk, number of other directions. And among targets, there was also Izium city, by the way, in Odessa region. Let me show you this area. City is located on Danube River, and together with other cities on the Danube from Odessa region are actively used by NATO for weapons shipments, right? And I guess some significant weapon shipments were happening during the previous 24 to 48 hours, and the Russian armed forces find it necessary to conduct a strike in direction of Izium. Last time I heard about strikes in this area was at least a couple of months ago, I guess. So hopefully this strike was successful, and NATO and the Kiev regime lost a significant number of military equipment and ammunition. Later on today, Russian Defense Ministry most likely will give us an update on this night long-range strikes. Also, dear friends, we have this report from Vzгляд newspaper that Ukrainian armed forces lost their elite regiment Skala in the Kharkov region almost completely. So the elite Skala regiment of the armed forces of Ukraine suffered critical losses in the Kharkov direction, losing its combat capability after fighting in Milovo area. The airborne assault regiment Skala of the armed forces of Ukraine has effectively ceased to exist as a combat unit on the Kharkov direction, according to sources of the TASS news agency. And of course, this is a good news for Russia and bad news for NATO and its terrorist proxies in Kiev. One less so-called elite formations in hands of Russian enemies. RIA Novosti and dear friends, of course, media outlets all over the world are now talking about this ultimatum that Trump issued towards Russia day before yesterday, about some 50 days during the which Russia should capitulate, basically, under pressure of the West, or and there is a question: what if not, right? And everybody is speculating now what will U.S. do if Russia will just ignore this ultimatum. I mean, long-range deliveries of long-range weapon systems, being ATACMS or JSSM cruise missiles or anything else, will unfortunately have some impact. Some of those missiles, if deployed, probably will manage to bypass our defense systems, 1, 2, 3% from whatever number will be launched, and that will be definitely issue. But in military terms, obviously, long-range strikes not not gonna turn the tide on the battlefield. We all understand that Russia conducts long-range strikes with quite often hundreds of weapon systems, drones, missiles, and so on quite regular basis. But these long-range strikes are not the means, or not the only means that can achieve a victory on the battlefield, right? Modern warfare works in a different manner, and after all, we have an example of Yemen, isn't it? Saudi Arabia, UAE, and then US, UK, and Israel were bombing this country and continue to bomb for last like, I don't know, 10, 11 years. And did they achieve much with these long-range bombings? Not really, right? It does harm, makes harm, right? Of course, generates significant issues, casualties, but long-range strikes not going to turn the tide. It's not works like that. So therefore, many experts, many media outlets are speculating what White House or the collective West can come up after these 50 days that will force Russia to submission, right? All sorts of speculations. I will give you my take on that in a couple of minutes. But we have statement from Lindsey Graham, by the way, on this very topic, U.S. Warhawk, so-called senator, and look what he has to say on the matter. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who is on Russia's list of extremists and the terrorists, said that Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei could answer all those who are hesitant about what will happen to Russia on their 51st day since US President Donald Trump began counting down the days until the conclusion of the deal on Ukraine. So basically, Lindsey Graham, I don't know, on behalf of Trump, on behalf of Pentagon, on behalf of CIA, or just on his own behalf, but clearly threatening Russia with the bombings, right? With US bombings. Because we all remember Trump sort of issued a 2-month ultimatum to Iran to agree on US demands. Iran refused, and on 61st day, allegedly it was the 61st day, when US conducted when US basically authorized their military campaign against Iran, which will go down in history as a 12-day Israeli-Iran war, right? And the US itself get engaged and conducted their strikes on Iran, right? Iran's nuclear facilities. And so this is direct threat, isn't it? Lindsey Graham, unfortunately, even though he's being taken as a clown by many, but unfortunately, forces that are behind the Lindsey Graham are clearly powerful, right? They are very much able to manipulate with the Trump. And maybe we don't like this, but we should, pay attention to what this warmonger psychopath is saying. And maybe, by the way, Pentagon, White House, and CIA are really considering NATO strikes on Russia, because US, UK, France, these are NATO countries, right? So maybe they really are working on scenarios that they're going to bomb Russia, by the way, directly. Not through their proxy key regime while maintaining plausible deniability in their hands, but directly. Which will mean, of course, Third World War straight away and full-scale nuclear exchange and the end of humanity. And unfortunately, because there is no journalists left in US MSM, no one is challenging this senator, and no one is asking question why he is being talking about World War III and potentially end of humanity with this ease. What is wrong with him, right? Because that's what he's talking about, right? About direct strikes on Russia, which is a full-scale nuclear war and the end of humanity. Death of 8-9 billion humans. That's the level of degeneration that US political class is experiencing, by the way, right? Nevertheless, also speculations are circulating on the internet about what kind of long-range weapon systems Kyiv regime will receive. basically we have at least partial confirmation that most likely ATACMS missiles will be transferred by US to launch against Russia. Potentially, long range modernized ATACMS missiles that will have a longer range than ordinary ones. So that means range of these ATACMS could be up to 500 kilometers and potentially even more. Reports even are, by the way, that White House now is considering, or Trump is considering, to allow long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. Although this report that is coming from Western media is kind of contradicting to everything that we already know. These long-range strikes deep into Russian territory already been authorized by Biden, right? And there was no reports that this authorization was canceled or something. So I don't think Trump needs to authorize what already is being authorized, right? And U.S. militaries, unfortunately, U.S. militaries and U.S. intelligence were striking deep into Russian territory with the ATACMS missiles hundreds of times. And I say hundreds of times because allegedly about 500 ATACMS missiles were delivered on Kiev-controlled territory, and most of it already being used. A couple of weeks ago, I saw reports in Western media that Kiev only had like 30 to 50 ATACMS missiles left, right? So yes, one of the weapon systems that Kiev regime will receive for formally Kiev regime, in reality, of course, we all understand that it's US, it's NATO that will use these missile systems, right? It's ATACMS, and another one is JSSM, and the Western media is reporting that Trump is allegedly hesitant to agree on a transfer of these missile systems, but because Trump was engaged, basically since he took the office, he was constantly engaged in disinformation operations, in deception operations, together with whoever is blackmailing him, whoever is in control of him, Israeli lobby, Zionists, globalists, or whomever, because he was constantly lying with whomever he was negotiating. Therefore, when Trump said, or when reports says in Western media that Trump is kind of hesitant to transfer JSSM cruise missiles to Kiev, that is a lie. Most likely that is a lie, and it is very much possible that these missiles already are either in Eastern Europe or maybe even on the Kiev-controlled territory. And these missiles, by the way, there are several types of these JSSM missiles, and their advanced modifications have range up to 1,000 kilometers. And what is also important to keep in mind that F-16, US-made F-16 fighter jets that Kiev regime, formerly Kiev regime, in reality NATO, has its in disposal on Kiev-controlled territory, are integrated with their JSSM, so they can launch these missiles without any extra additional work on the planes, right? So this is also something to keep in mind. And Trump, by the way, himself went to say that weapons already heading to Ukraine. They've been transferred from Germany and some other places, and it will be better if we will just listen to his statement itself. Just a sec, dear friends, and I give you his.
Is coming in from Germany and then replaced by Germany, and in all cases, the United States gets paid back in full.
Have you started?
What's happening, as you know, is the European Union, if you look, mostly European Union stuff, but let's put it in the form of NATO. It's very similar. But NATO is going to pay us back for everything. In some cases, we're going to be paid back by countries of the European Union directly.
So Germany will take on most of the burden when it comes to these U.S. weapons. Seems like at least that's kind of intention that Washington has. that Germany will pay for everything. But at this point, speculations that we are hearing is about Patriot batteries, right? And as you know, 2 days ago, when Trump was issuing this ultimatum to Russia, he was talking about a country that might transfer 17 Patriot batteries, right? And media began speculating which country that might be. And there are kind of answer. We have kind of answer on that. So Switzerland, by the way, may be the country that could sell 17 Patriot systems for transfer to Ukraine, according to New York Times, according to Western propaganda outlet. So Switzerland has no need for Patriot systems. The article also says that US currently has about 60 systems out of about 180 in the world, and so much for status of neutrality for Switzerland, isn't it? Of course, Russia no longer considers Switzerland to be a neutral state, but and for objective reasons, by the way, so many Swiss weapon systems or weapon systems with Swiss equipment had been destroyed already on the battlefield. That come on, man. And Switzerland is joining all anti-Russian steps that collective West is taking. So therefore, in no universe, Switzerland could be considered as a neutral. But nevertheless, at least Bern is still claiming to be the neutral, right? And well, so much for that neutrality. 17 Patriot systems might go to Ukraine allegedly from Switzerland, and on top of that, dear friends, reports are that Trump offered the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to buy 5 Patriot systems from the United States for Kiev instead of 2. And well, Merz, according to Wall Street Journal, agreed, but we'll discuss this with the leaders of Europe, because these systems cost a lot, by the way. I mean, at least $1 billion, right? At least $1 billion. It depends which generation of the Patriot we are talking about, right? And number of European countries already expressing their frustration because they don't want to pay for US weapons, by the way. They want US to transfer weapons for free or to pay for it from US taxpayers' money. And on this very topic, dear friends, we have this statement, this information from RT, that EU tells US to share the burden for Ukraine weapons. So the EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas has welcomed US President Donald Trump's promise to send more weapons to Kiev, but said he can't describe it as American aid if European NATO states are fully bankrolling their initiative. And well, she basically demanded that US should do more and should send more weapons and more money, by the way, to prolong this proxy war against Russia. And many people are wondering, by the way, and on the topic of unhappiness of European elites with Trump. We have reports that Czech Republic refused to buy US weapon systems. France is refusing to buy weapon systems from US to then transfer to Kiev regime. But many people probably are wondering what is the Moscow's reaction on all these latest developments. I mean, Trump's ultimatum, this new military aid packages, and so on. And well, Peskov, press spokesman of the Russian president, stated that Moscow will study statements of Trump carefully, and that's it, really. And we also have a statement of Shoigu, by the way, former defense minister, current secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. Let me give you his statement. This approach has long been promoted by Donald Trump, who during his election campaign repeatedly stated that this is not his war and called on Europe to bear greater financial responsibility for its own security. Sergei Shoigu told the Kommersant. He also promised to force Europeans to buy weapons in the interests of the Kiev regime, refusing to provide free supplies. It is also coincidence. It's not coincidence that U.S. Permanent representative to NATO Matthew Whitaker emphasized that the days when Washington spent unlimited amount of taxpayers' money on aid to Ukraine are a thing of past, and now this burden lies on the shoulders of the people of Europe. That's the comment from Shoigu, by the way. Nothing critical, basically, about Trump, his decisions. I find it a bit strange that Russian officials, despite all the negativity that comes from Trump towards Russia, towards Russian people, towards Russia, towards Russian leadership, Russian political elites are exercising, let's say, restraint. I'm gonna start hate this word, man, restraint. Russian politicians are exercising restraint, and but practically nobody is saying anything critical about Trump, which is, I don't get it. I don't get it, by the way. Trump is on Epstein list, right? He is not a person to be respected. And why Russian politicians are shying to say about Trump what they really think, I don't know. I don't know, but it is what it is, right? If you were expecting that Russian politicians, Russian officials will come up with some strong statements after Trump's ultimatum and all the other stuff, then answer is no. It's not happening. At least for now. Maybe at one point, Moscow will say, I mean, we really have had enough of it, and then things might change. But currently, that's how the situation is, by the way, right? And with all these developments, no one should be surprised that Kiev regime is emboldened big time. By the way, big time, and every day we are receiving from Western-backed terrorist regime of Zalinski more and more strong statements towards Russia, threats towards Russia, and for example, Zelensky went to say that they are ready to use some extreme force against Russia. They will not hesitate, and Zelensky wants Trump to be on board with this. Right? Let me give you a short clip of his interview, by the way. So,
they're already being shipped. From what?
Sorry, this is not the video that I want to show you.
And all of America and Europe know that we want peace and an end to the war. But the Russians understand only force. So, only strong sanctions and only strong weapons. We are ready for action, for a demonstration of force. I remember that we had a powerful deterrence package before President Trump became president. I wanted America to sell us such a package, but it was not done. We talked to President Trump about these things. I would really like us to be strong. A demonstration of strength forces Putin to the negotiating table. It is not a fact that we will have to use this force. But if Russia knows about its existence, it is already a strong argument for ending the war.
So question is what he was talking about. What kind of force they are ready to use to force Russia to obey orders from the West. And people might speculate that he is talking about Zelensky is involved because of the deliveries of the long-range weapon systems, ATACMS, JSSMs, potentially Taurus missiles from Germany that maybe already being delivered to Kiev regime. Yes, that's a possibility. Maybe he's talking about large-scale long-range missile strikes on Russia with all these additional long-range weapon systems that NATO will deploy to the battlefield while maintaining plausible deniability, because they're going to say it's a Kiev regime, right, that doing these attacks. But in my personal opinion, I think Zelensky is hinting on something bigger, which is nuclear weapons. That's what he is talking about. And you know my take, dear friends. I said many times before that these extremely desperate globalists and their controlled regimes in Europe will go all the way. Will go all the way to harm Russia as much as they can, to destroy Russia, and they will use any means, literally any means, including nuclear blackmail. And if nuclear blackmail will not work, then actual nuclear attacks. And I know in the field of alternative media, many commentators are hesitant to believe that Western elites are that reckless to actually, transform Kiev regime into a nuclear armed regime. And the argument is that it is not possible that US or France or the UK will give nuclear weapons to Kiev regime. And I agree on that point that, of course, US not going to give no nuclear weapons to Kiev regime from its arsenal. UK will not do this. They're not going to give their nuclear warheads to formally Kiev regime. And France not going to give no nuclear weapons from their stockpiles to Kiev regime. But what they will do, and I'm afraid already did, is they will use nuclear fuel, or let's say radioactive materials from Ukraine, by the way, from Ukraine, to build their basic atomic bombs, not thermonuclear weapons that are modern nuclear weapon systems, but basic atomic bombs that can be traced in case of explosion, can be traced back to nuclear reactors that are operating on Kiev controlled territory, right? So I'm afraid they already used top radioactive materials from Kiev regime, build their atomic bombs. They have, I guess, number of these basic atomic bombs of low yield, which means 3 to 5, maybe up to 10 kilotons, which is a lot, by the way, right? It might call the low yield, but this is in comparison to modern nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons that have 150, 200 kilotons of power, and in some cases in a megatons even, right? And so, yes, that's what is going on, in my personal opinion. That's what Zelensky is hinting about, that Biden's administration was on board with this idea of deterrent, right? Nothing else can be even considered as a means to deter Russia. But nuclear blackmail is a whole different story, right? Nuclear weapons are scary stuff, by the way. And if there is any threat that nuclear weapons might be used against you, then you cannot ignore that. You just cannot, right? So I'm afraid that's what is happening, by the way. And after 50 days, after this ultimatum of Trump will expire, I'm afraid we're going to see public transformation of the Kiev regime into a nuclear armed regime. Ground for that is have been prepared already. So many Western propaganda outlets, by the way, were writing for many months about capabilities of Kiev regime to build their atomic weapons, right? Economist, by the way, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, plenty of Western outlets, by the way, plenty of Western media outlets were writing about this stuff. Ground is being prepared for that, and I'm afraid after this 50-day will expire, Zelensky might declare, maybe even before 50-day will expire, Zelensky may declare that they have nuclear weapons now in their disposal, right? That's what I think. I hope I'm mistaken, by the way, but I think they're gonna go nuclear, because there's no way, by the way, they're gonna have any more or less significant influence on the battlefield with their whatever weapons they might be able to transfer to Kiev regime, long-range missiles, short-range missiles. Unfortunately, they can harm, of course, Russian militaries, Russian civilians, but they're not going to be able to turn the tide, right? But nuclear weapons are very different stuff. I mean, it's a whole different league, right? And unfortunately, I mean, Zelensky is, in my reading, by the way, he's clearly saying that they are ready to use this force, right? And Trump probably is on board with that. He is on board with that, right? And until it's not too late, maybe it will be better if Russia will take preemptive strikes, because we are talking about nuclear weapons, by the way. So I hope Russian leadership will calculate everything and to make sure that Kiev regime not going to be able to strike Russia with nuclear weapons. Hopefully, some preemptive strikes will happen with whatever weapons are needed. By the way, with whatever force, and Russia has a quite impressive arsenal in this matter, right? So something has to be done to neutralize this threat. Otherwise, we will face, if now there is talks about long range strikes on Russia in 50 days, 50, 60 days times, and after that, talk is going to be about nuclear Ukraine, right? Nuclear regime and potential nuclear strikes on Russia. So we cannot allow this to happen, right? And when it comes to escalation with Russia, by the way, probably you already have heard reports that Trump allegedly on July 4th, when he had a phone conversation with Zelensky, told him to bomb Moscow and St. Petersburg, right? According to Western media outlets, by the way. Financial Times reported on that, for example, that Donald Trump privately urged Ukraine to strike deep inside the Russian territory, even asking Zelensky if Kiev could target Moscow and St. Petersburg if the US supplied long-range weapons. The July 4th call between Trump and Zelensky followed Trump's reportedly short phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin the day before. According to sources briefed on the matter, Trump asked Vladimir Zelensky, "Can you hit Moscow? Can you hit St. Petersburg too?" Zelensky replied affirmatively, contingent on receiving the necessary weaponry. And I mean, this is dangerous, isn't it? This is dangerous, by the way. Yet again, we already have enough factual evidences to be sure that Trump is clearly in the hands of globalists and Zionists under control, strict control of these influential groups, and we all know that globalists will go all the way in this war against Russia. And Trump was asked about it. Trump was asked about. This is one more reason, by the way. This report from Financial Times. One more reason why Russia should take preemptive measures to neutralize all possible threats that Kiev regime may come up with, and hopefully these preemptive measures will be taken, because time for restraint is over. I'm 100% convinced that Russian leadership have no more time to continue this exercise of restraint, because tomorrow they're gonna bomb us, for God's sake, with nuclear weapons, with atomic bombs, right? Do we want this here in Russia? Are we waiting for Kiev regime to, and the NATO, by the way, to bomb us with the nuclear weapons? We don't need this, right? So therefore, just take action, for God's sake, and neutralize whatever threats are generated by our enemies. US, UK, France, Germany, Zelensky's regime, all the others, by the way. Has Russia opportunity and means to take the actions? Yes. So what are we waiting for? That's my question on the matter. Things are very serious, by the way. Things are very serious, and well, I don't think anybody from us needs any additional confirmations that collective West is gone mad, by the way, and are capable of literally anything, right? But Trump was asked, by the way, about this report from Financial Times about telling Zelensky to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg, and he denied. He denied this claims. I can give you a short interview of short video of that. For example, that's their video, by the way.
Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
So, of course, publicly, what else he gonna say? But I believe Financial Times' report is correct, by the way. I rarely believe in reports in Western media outlets, but based on behavior of the Trump, I truly believe that he demanded from Zelensky to use long-range weapon systems. He basically prepared the ground for attacks on Moscow and St. Petersburg, right? And whatever long-range weapon systems will be transferred to Kiev-controlled territory, and of course, they will be operated by U.S. military personnel, but responsibility for strikes will lay on Zelensky. Zelensky will take responsibility for that, and that's why Trump told him that are you ready to take a responsibility? And Zelensky said yes. Right? That's what is happening. We did not have no comment, by the way, from Russian. I did not see, at least, any comments from Russian officials on this report. But yet again, for whatever reason, Russian leadership is hesitant to say single negative word about Trump. Man, I find it frustrating. Trump is insulting Russian people. Trump openly said that the lives of Russian people mean nothing. He insulted the Russian president on several occasions, by the way, at this point, and Russian politicians are keeping quiet. Wow, man. Wow. So yes, White House also denied, by the way. Trump himself personally denied, and White House, or press secretary of the White House, Caroline Lewitt, also denied that Trump was demanding from Zelensky attacks on Moscow and Kiev. He was not demanding attacks on Moscow and Kiev, by the way. This long-range weapon system is going to be operated by U.S. militaries, right? We'll understand that. It's those long-range weapon systems going to be operated by U.S. militaries. They're going to use U.S. targeting data, U.S. intelligence, isn't it? Trump was basically telling Zelensky that you're going to take responsibility for that. Are you ready? That's what it is. And Zelensky responded affirmatively that yes, he can do that, right? He will take the heat. Well, things are going to escalate, dear friends. As I was predicting, a situation will only escalate, by the way, will only escalate until Russia will finally says, or Russian leadership will finally say enough is enough, and until Russia will use force capable of bringing Western so-called elites to their senses. Hello, everyone. I hope you find informative and useful this short clip from main news update, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.